Hi, Lewis. How are you?
Good for us. How are you?
Good, thank you. Pleasure to have you on. Thank you for agreeing to come on and be a guest.
Yeah, it's absolute pleasure. Yeah, looking forward to the session. I know we've known each other for I think a handful of years now, so excited about the upcoming podcast.
Amazing. Well, it'd be good to kind of, for those who may not know much about you, it'd be good to have a quick kind of introduction to a bit about yourself.
Yeah, happy to. So, Luis Giraldo, currently run our partner and alliances business for OutSystems here in the Americas. Been with the company almost 6 years and have fulfilled different capacities, but most recently joined to lead the practice for the Americas, which is all of US, Canada, and Latin America at the start of this year. So that's me.
Yeah, yeah. And, you mentioned 6 years without systems and various roles, kind of, you've gone from kind of the value engineering to strategic sales and now on the partner and alliances, how has your view of value realization changed along those 6 years?
Yeah, it's a very healthy question. I think probably the topic in its own right, but from my perspective, I think value realization is at the core of really any enterprise organization, and particularly in today's era, right, where there's just so many disruptive technologies, so much proliferation of different options that buyers, evaluators, users have to go through. And so for me, there's some things that have remained, I think, foundational in nature, which is leading with more value-based conversations, and even more importantly now, just to identify what are the pain points and leading with more of success stories and how customers have realized value with your given technology that you position. But I would say it's less now of it's what I would say the traditional model of having a value engineering practice and value consulting practice is still important, but that truly has to be now more so embedded across the various teams. So cross-functionally, the start, of conversations all the way through into onboarding clients and ultimately ensuring adoption and value realization longer term, right? So it does, I think, span the entire ecosystem. And it's not just internally. Naturally, that has to be extended out into your partner ecosystem to support that effort. So I think it's become actually more important nowadays with just, again, all the saturation of different technologies.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to understand which tool to use for what job and how that all comes together. And so I think the more you can, baseline on why it's important and continue that thread through the conversations, I think puts you in a differentiated position for
Yeah.
sure.
And, I think, especially with your kind of the roles you've done fitting into the partner side, coming from a more customer standpoint, I think definitely is an advantage, right? Because you've been
Mm-hmm.
in the trenches, speaking to customers, kind of, the conversations they're having. But then obviously partners, now being involved with partners, you can kind of relay that what your kind of ideas are, what you think can work, how, especially with so much disruption in the market.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I think, maintaining a customer pulse is crucial, and a market pulse, frankly, I think of how different organizations are bringing in your technology and adopting that and ultimately realizing that quick time to value and scaling that value, right? I think most organizations support a land and expand motion. And I think just to your point, which is if you think about my background, value consulting is typically always been applied to strategic customers, right? When you think about more SMB market and others, it's still important, but it's less of a, I would say, requirement to go in through in-depth, let's say, scoping and portfolio analysis as an example, and then ultimately a business case and ROI justification that senior leadership needs to support, right? And review to make a bigger financial decision. So I think, with that, I've had a lot of experience with many enterprise clients across industry, not just here at OutSystems, but through my career. And I do think as you look at how that translates, not, just only to the partner ecosystem, but more broadly is it's not simply just a relationship conversation. It's got to be very, I would say, sales oriented and very driven around how do you drive not just strategic customers, but strategic partners in the ecosystems to understand the value proposition, lead with that, and memorialize that ultimately as you get into implementation and that time to value. So I think keeping that pulse on what's
Yeah.
happening, understanding what lessons are learned, both good and bad, is important to be able to, I think, speak to that credibly when you're in conversations with, partners that are evaluating your technology and customers alike. So I think it's a thread that needs to continue.
Yeah. And I'm interested to know because I looked at your background before OutSystems and things like that, right? And, I'm interested to know what was your first view of OutSystems when you came across it? What was your kind of first impression of most people I speak to in the Americas hadn't heard of it before, so I'm just keen to know how it was for you.
Yeah. So I think in a short answer, it's the best kept secret. So I think not widely known, as you mentioned. And it's interesting, right? Even after being 9-time Magic Quadrant leader, there is still a brand awareness, challenges that we go through. I think that's improving. I think as you see more adoption of low code and enterprise innovation with low code technologies like OutSystems, that awareness is improving. But I think it's largely based upon the roots of the company, right?
Yeah.
As far as Lisbon based and establishing a very mature and successful market in Europe and in Asia Pacific for what I would say is a 15 to 18-year runway before Americas became really a critical market to invest in, knowing that America's market is vital, right, to drive continued scale for any enterprise organization. So I think it's a bit of the combination of the roots of the company. And then I think also, you and I have spoken about this, and this will lead into some of the topic at hand today is we're what I would say the richness and the flexibility and robustness of the platform lends itself to support a lot of different use cases for many different types of clients cross industry. And so, we're now $500 million plus in revenues. So sizable organization supporting thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of community members and partners alike across many, many applications. And so that tends to get it to a point where you have to start to become more prescriptive. And so I think, the shift that we're doing is taking a lot of the richness and the success we've had across partners and customers over the years and starting to be more prescriptive and tying back to the point here, which is value, right? So if I'm making a decision, and I'm trying to bridge the business and IT sort of alignment around making that decision on technology. There has to be a clear correlation on that technology supporting that business pain and ultimately delivering that value. So that comes down to the industry and micro industry level, and then supporting use cases that other customers have realized value with.
Yeah. And, speaking about the platform itself, obviously it's known for speed, but, the value isn't just speed. So how are you measuring that today?
Yeah. So a number of different metrics, and I think these metrics have evolved now with the disruption of GenAI. Only, I think, increase the what I would refer to as value drivers or productivity multipliers. So I think speed is table stakes at this point. You can get caught up in the time to market, still very crucial. But I think when you look at it, the time to market's, kind of baseline. It's also looking at the resource pool that you have and the backlog that you have to understand, okay, it's not just about the first application or set of applications. It's about how do you address that backlog effectively with the resources that you have. So I think it's sometimes doing doing more with less rather, or doing more with what you have. And so that's the classic, I think, conversation and dilemma that's happening today. And so we're seeing an increased adoption of the platform as a result because it's time to market, but maintainability and supportability of those applications, to ensure that they can scale effectively and be future proof to support ongoing application needs is also critically important. If you look at Gartner's reports around TCO, much of the cost associated with total cost of ownership is on the OpEx side, right? So the ongoing, maintainability and continuous integration and development work that's required for applications, because you very rarely do you get the application right the first time. And you have to continue to change that. And so that integration within business and IT is crucial. So I'd say, to kind of hit the key points, you got time to market, resource utilization, productivity as far as the types of resources you have and that you can recruit. There's a natural upskilling, reskilling of that talent. And then the ongoing requirement of that continued development, integration, and effort to make sure that you have, you're keeping technology debt at bay. So I think those are some of the primary drivers that we look at. And, there's a lot of focus right now on consolidation of technology stacks, as we know. And so I think interoperability and coexistence is also a critical rather aspect to make sure that, technology is driving the right behavior and user experiences, but also make sure that your cost is kept at bay, right, as you scale effectively.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And what's changing in how, value is co-created between, vendor, customer, and partners?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot changing, to be honest. I think if I look at it from the partner perspective process, I think what we're seeing, and this is probably to no surprise to the audience, is there's margin compression, I would say, on some of the traditional services, relation to implementation, advisory. And so I think you look at the traditional, large scale resource heavy implementation projects, ERP rollouts, CRM deployments as an example, custom app dev. Generative AI now is into the fold, accelerating that whole sort of configuration, integration, testing, and ongoing, application development in the context of this conversation. So I think that compression of margin now is pushing many, what I see in conversations and played out with customers, is revisiting sort of their partner relationships to figure out which partners can deliver cost effectively and quickly over time. I mean, there's always going to be like legacy. There's always going to be traditional large scale implementations that are required, but I think that's being disrupted with a lot of the technology that's been introduced from a generative AI perspective, as well as low code to full, right? There's the convergence, I think, of both, that comes to mind. And I think, there's, with that also many direct organizations are leveraging AI to support many of these different areas. So, that reliance on the partner might be shifting a bit. I think partners are still crucial, right, in the equation. So I think there's now just what I would say a refinement to those partner relationships, different types of partners that, whether it's platform operations, advisory across a larger transformation project or app development, right? I think that's being revisited. And with GenAI and full stack development, with OutSystems as an example, there's a compression of that from what are the resources required and the time by which I need to actually deliver on those. So, and just to round it off, and as far as some of the other things I'm observing is, that again goes back to what are the expectations of value from the client. Yeah. So, what am I paying for? Am I getting value? Like, no customer wants to wait, 2-3 years to start to be able to, go back to leadership and the business and shareholders to say, yeah, so we think it's going to work. And here's some proof points. I think now that expectation is compressed significantly, and it's just putting, I think, healthy pressure on the ecosystem to make sure that they're performant and flexible.
Yeah. 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 And, what role do POCs and ideation play in, validating business cases?
Yeah. So I think on both the sort of product fit as well as on the business case, it plays a very critical role. I mean, I think rapid prototyping, whether it's in the form of a POC or an MVP, many different terms are leveraged out there. I think it's absolutely crucial. We need to be able to pull forward with our partners to demonstrate what that can look like. And now you have the capabilities out there to do that in a matter of whether it's days or weeks to get to what is, a viable sort of solution that business and IT can look at and determine, is this what we're looking for? So that's kind of on the product and I would say sales kind of motion engagement standpoint. And then on the business case front, I think we're seeing a lot of now with AI of, the often sort of ROI calculator that's presented by many organizations. I think that's always been in there, but now there's the ability to pull in data and actually provide more of a relevant, customizable, and impactful business case that's kind of outside in, is much quicker and more accurate and probably more tailored to what customers or prospects can kind of realize ultimately with a given technology. And then I think those tools now are more embedded through the sales motion cross-functionally that make it, interesting to where if you're capturing the right inputs, you can quickly generate some hypotheses and business value cases more seamlessly and I think more intuitively than you had before, where it was a, separate effort, multi-week process. Let's workshop, let's do design thinking, all of these things that are still, I think, important in there and done in the right way. But those, the traditional model again is being turned on its head a bit given what's available.
Mm-hmm. And, you haven't been in your role for a year yet, it's still kind of, within the first year, and then also, change in leadership and things like that, how has the current partner strategy, what is the current partner strategy, and how is it focused on delivering outcomes and not just implementations?
Yeah, I think, that's part of, I think why I was brought in was to try to really leverage, as you began at the top of this conversation, the value sort of driven methodology coupled with strategic sales and bring that into to driving execution, in what I would say is a more sales oriented partner motion with strategic partners supporting that. So the body of work that really has been important and continues and always will be is, I think all organizations, including OutSystems, and what I'm driving here is rationalization of that partner ecosystem, right? Because there's, it's the traditional, you have to look at sort of the hyperscalers, you have to look at the GSIs, you have to look at regionals and specialized partners, and sort of mixture of all of those to make sure that you have a vibrant, healthy ecosystem that can support various requirements that, customers have with your type of technology, particularly when we're talking about a platform like OutSystems, which has a lot of full stack capabilities and can support, as I mentioned earlier, many use cases. So I think, taking that foundation that I've built over the many years now, can't believe I'm dating myself, but 25 plus years, I think has been, frankly, hopefully an advantage, and we'll be applying that, that methodology and focus with the partner ecosystem. So I think rationalizing the partners is key. And just quickly, two other points, taking the success we've had and now becoming more prescriptive in that effort as we go to market, right? And as we look at the various industries, we service 28 plus industries, as I mentioned. How do we start to not alienate certain industries that we can still serve, but how do we focus with our partners more on where that demand is, and in coordination with our partners who have great industry expertise and past success and current success implementing our technology and our platform with customers to realize value? How do we become more focused on those go-to-market motions with the partners, execute at scale, right? Because we're now at a point where we need to scale to, 3x of what we are today. And in order to do that, you need to have more prescriptive rinse and repeat type approaches that are widely recognized by the market. And I think back to your point, right? The market knows of OutSystems, I think, at a high level, but getting more of that, what I would say, prescriptive go-to-market partner solutioning and accelerators is going to only help drive more of that awareness within industry that will scale the business. So those are just some points. I think there's others, but I think that's a lot of the work and how we're shifting. And I think Woodson coming in helps that from his extensive track record and success at Salesforce. And so I think with us, it's how do we mobilize our go-to-market teams and our partner ecosystem alike to capitalize on that market opportunity that we have in front of us.
Yeah. And, talking about like a solution orientated partner, what does that model actually look like in practice?
Yeah, it's good. We're going through that, from my, again, as I meant, just a little bit under a year in the role. I think part of this is clarity on when we define solutions. And so terminology matters, right? As far as baselining with your partners, because there's horizontal use cases that can be applicable to multi-industry. And then there's also very specific within industry solutions that, for instance, that could be core integrations into existing systems within healthcare, right? Like Epic, Cerner, HL7 as a prime example. Or it could be, hey, manufacturing core system, integration with SAP, keeping the core clean, but how do you modernize, the front end through better orchestration, integration across the enterprise? So I think as we look at it, we have to, back to my point, is identify where we've had success, but also challenge ourselves to say, what does the market look like and where is the demand for our type of platform coupled with our partners? And so what that looks like, I feel, is one is alignment on where we're focused. Two is constructing the right incentive model and program structure with our partners, which is we're continuing to evolve that, and establishing flexibility around how we can service our clients, right? Whether that's in the form of an ISV, MSP, those are options, or, different tactics of how we bundle those solutions together.
And how are you investing in the alliances and hyperscalers to grow OutSystems' footprint in the Americas?
Yeah. So, we've invested in the past, and I think what we're seeing now is that there has to be a doubling down in particularly in the alliances as well as in the hyperscalers. And so what I see is really a lot of the work this year at least from my vantage point, has been to rationalize that ecosystem. So I think for alliances and hyperscalers, we are going to continue to invest across a number of fronts, whether that's more support dedication from partner solution architects. And we're actually looking to drive more dedicated focus on the alliances business, as well as our hyperscalers, particularly AWS, Microsoft, but as well as
Yeah.
GCP. So I think part of it's resources, but part of it is also looking at what is our go-to-market motion to support that. And so, we are going to continue to invest in the partner ecosystem. And so I think solutions and alliances is another area that we're currently investing in, not just within the Americas, but globally. So bringing in folks, I think, from the outside that can also complement our existing set of resources that are well experienced on the platform to bring in that expertise and that proven track record of scaling organizations to build out those, the maturity around that area. So I think we have a great opportunity in front of us. We probably haven't been as fast as we've needed to support that scale for across alliances and hyperscalers, but I think that's coming in short order. And with alliances in particular, like if you think about a platform like OutSystems, some of the core systems we integrate with are, ServiceNow and Salesforce and Microsoft, just to name a few, and UiPath and many others. And so, there is, like I always say, there's always co-opetition, right? There's opportunities to coexist and there's opportunities to look at displacing, but in the end, it's going to be driven by what the customer is looking to do. And so we see all flavors of that, but for our lead into it's, there's a lot of use cases we support that preserve a lot of those existing investments across those large incumbents. And I think that's a great play for us because we have a lot of that interoperability and I would say coexistence with many of those core technologies that have massive investments and massive footprints within our partners and customers. It's really what are the differentiations that we bring to bear to support that modernization effort. And I think there's plenty of that. And so it's really just trying to get alignment with the customers and partners of how we bring in the technology. But I think that's an area we'll see that there's going to be continued investment.
Yeah. And you touched on it briefly on, what kind of enablement and program structure, you're building to support kind of, everything that it's moving fast, right? So how are you kind of putting things in place to make sure everyone's keeping up?
This is close to your world, right? For us, I think, it's a good question. There's a lot underneath it. So I have to figure out how I can answer it best. But, I do think it's a combination of the classic, you need to have digital assets and a digital, footprint and experience that's streamlined and that makes it easy to do business. And so we're continuing to invest around how we streamline, sort of partner portal and providing a lot of that richness around, deal registrations and knowledge base and training and certification. So a lot of that exists today. It's really how do you continue to refine, tighten that up and be that and have that, that experience improve. And so we continue to look for feedback from our partners on that front. So that won't go away. So continued investment, but then layering in back to my point of as far as what we're building, as a more robust partner strategy and supporting infrastructure does require more resources, right, to address, each of those different types of partners I mentioned earlier effectively. So I think the combination of the digital experience and that partner hub, so to speak, coupled with more investment across key resources, solution architects, solutions, right, focused, as well as partner alliance managers. All of that is underway and continuing to scale globally, and particularly here in the Americas is one of our key markets for growth. And I think you also have to make sure that the incentive model is aligning with partners bringing you business, right, and vice versa, us bringing partners into business. And so that's also a body of work where, I think we've got a pretty good foundation, but we're looking at what are the various levers that we can start to flex to drive more incentive of partners that maybe have a large footprint with Pega and Salesforce. It's like, why does OutSystems matter, right? And so I think a combination of those and education awareness will help the continued momentum we're seeing with partners looking at OutSystems as not just a head-to-head, competition with their existing business, right, that they serve, right, for customers, but complementary to actually scaling and driving further transformation in the age of AI.
And speaking about AI, obviously that's in every conversation, and I think for the last 2 years, if you're not talking about it, no one wants to talk to you, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
what,
You have to
you
weave it
know,
in there somehow, right?
yeah, yeah, right. So, just kind of within your role, how are you seeing, what are the big shifts you're seeing in the partner world, especially with now Gen AI entering the picture?
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, I think partners are not just the margin pressures right on some of the traditional models and resourcing, but I think many partners are trying to figure out, like, am I an implementation partner, or a delivery partner, advisory, or am I a solutions partner, or maybe I have to be a combination of all of those. So again, I'm not an expert as far as where the market's going, but I think it is pressure testing, many of the large SIs and partners that have done work in a traditional manner. And you're seeing it. I work with a lot of these folks day in and day out. That there's a shift, right? There is a shift and there's happening, but the balancing, act of that is always quite tricky. So I think it's clear that, like we've just released our workbench, right?
Yep.
AI agent workbench. Many of these key partners have their own workbench of bringing in AI into the equation of building, whether it's solutions or help enabling quicker time to market and more cost effective services and support. So I think that's a ongoing sort of, I would say, constant evaluation for many partners to look at. And then, then there's the competition from the direct customer of them building out that functionality and a lot of those services themselves. So I think it's a balancing act, but there's still a requirement for partners to be in many of the organizations, and particularly at an enterprise level, which for us, we
Yep.
serve. So I think it's how those pieces come together. And so I think that the model, as I mentioned, is getting disruptive. And then I think for us, working with partners, and I think probably most cutting edge technology organizations that are delivering, what we provide, right, mission grade, enterprise
Yep.
scale type applications in the form of a platform, we have to be able to lead with partners on what is our position and what is our thought leadership and what is our product roadmap and strategy to support that. Because, the natural disruption and I would say noise to a certain extent is coming in from many players that can do aspects, maybe not all of what we do, but do them really well. Like, let's think about the app generation piece, like that.
Yeah.
A lot of players in the space that can do a lot of that, but you have to think about some of the longer term implications, future proofing, and particularly security, compliance, and scalability of what you're building, to where we're not just proliferating past
Yeah.
past experiences of compounding technical debt, right? By just activating a bunch of agents across the enterprise, and then costs can get pretty unwieldy pretty quickly.
Yeah. And obviously it's, it's the buzz, it's everywhere, and obviously there's all leaders are thinking about it, talking about it, going to all these conferences to hear about, and I've seen stats around 50% of projects fail, because they get off to the wrong foot, right? So how are partners kind of helping customers cut through the noise and really focus on real use cases?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and one that I think plays well to not just our platform, but the importance of engaging with partners, high and early around this topic. And what I would say is, when you look at it, what I see is sometimes there's one is many folks that are trying to implement generative AI within the enterprise are unclear on where to start. Coupling that with, again, the many, many options that are out there, and do I invest in low code or do I go traditional with co-pilots? Like, all of this toil requires, thought leadership and advisory from not just ourselves, but in coordination with our partners. Because, what any buyer, any evaluator of technology wants to understand is, where have you done it before? And what did that journey look like? And
Yeah.
is that relevant to me? And so tell me what the sharp edges are. Tell me what the goodness is. And that goes back to the value-based conversation. I think we have to lead more. The importance of leading with that story early on and coordination with partners is crucial to getting buy-in, and not just getting buy-in from the IT folks with business, and ultimately making sure that that's going to be adopted for success, because it is about quick wins. It is about starting somewhere, but that somewhere has to be meaningful enough to exhibit, one, the adoption and then the continued investment and training. And there's a lot of strategies that are happening within customers and data and AI and building out, compliance and the data models, and whether it's that or they're going to leverage, third parties and within their given technologies. All of that is, there's a lot going on. So I think understanding how an organization, their maturity in that, in that cycle that we're in is crucial. And then layering in expertise from our partners and what we see are proven trends and what we've delivered is complementary to helping that customer understand the journey and feeling reassured that, we have the support to drive that success with them.
And you touched on it's a crowded market, right? Everyone's kind of adding AI to their platform and focusing on the AI piece more than anything else. How does OutSystems and even the partners, with the customer education side, obviously OutSystems in itself, you're the platform, so you're constantly looking at this. And so there's more kind of trust when you go in saying, okay, we're doing all this within our platform. We've got that, thought leadership. We know what we're doing. Partner side, it's a bit more difficult because, I've experienced partners who are pitching for these type of projects with no experience themselves, and they kind of want to learn on the job, right? Which probably isn't the best approach. So how are you kind of approaching that, from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, OutSystems, like many other organizations, it's just constantly evolving, right? As far as where the market's headed. I think what we tend to focus in on a little bit from our standpoint is what has been the foundation for success that got us here. And I think we've had upwards of 8 years, if not more, already investing in AI embedded within the software development lifecycle. And so I think for us, there's foundational pieces that are important before you jump into, to your point earlier, there's just the flash, right? The flash of app gen and here, look what this is, has created. And wow, that's amazing. That was done in a matter of minutes, because you still don't know if that's going to be production grade and ready to actually support the actual use case. So the prototyping is a means to an end of actually putting applications in production. So we tend to focus on our core strength for many years. That's basically helped us drive the success in the market, pioneering the market, as you know, many years ago. So I think that thought leadership with partners is establishing, before getting into the platform itself, that there is a track record there. There's proven success and that there's been investment behind that naturally. And many clients have remained with us for many years. So I think there's a credibility check there that we can bring just on that foundational piece, because software development is one of the major areas of disruption, right? That generative AI is bringing, which is, hey, everyone thinks we're going to have a bunch of agents just running and developers are going to be non-existent in a matter of years. I think just the role is going to change. So I think we have a perspective there that says the enterprise developer is still important. Even citizen development is still important, because that's just a byproduct of trying to close the gap between having enough resources to actually deliver on products. So it's going to be more people interacting and developing applications, but you still need some of those core folks to be involved. And just coming back to your point, I think it's, what do we do? I think we focus on the foundations, we focus on our core strength while still demonstrating we're evolving, and the flexibility will lend itself to bringing in different strategies that organizations have of how they want to pull in generative AI, whether it's, on our platform or a combination of our platform and different solution, portfolios or suites that they're going to be leveraging. And then with partners, I mean, that's part of the assessment I'm going through, which is, clearly understanding which partners have that data and AI strategy as part of their key aspects of going to market, and, complementing the platform and the work we're doing and where we're headed with that partner's experience and specialization, right? So we have to be able to go in there knowing from our partnership of where that customer is and how we can help them and support them through that journey, right? Because it's not no one journey is probably the same.
Yeah. And for years, the traditional kind of transformation timeline is 3 to 5 years, right? Kind of, that was the norm, right? Everyone was kind of used to that expectation. Obviously now that's being questioned. So how's OutSystems helping partners prove that value much faster?
Yeah. So compression of realization of value is kind of what I would recap in your question. So I think OutSystems is focused again on making sure that we are enabling partners to be front and center and leaning in on that, that evaluation of customers. So naturally, we want to be part of that conversation, but we have to enable and really use them as an extension of our go-to-market field, right? From an OutSystems perspective. So I think there's a heavy emphasis for us to what I would refer to as activate our partner ecosystem and drive utilization around not just the technology folks, right? The developers and engineers and architects for that matter, but also making sure that the business folks that are in conversations every day from our partner ecosystem into those customers and prospects can quickly, articulate what is the value proposition of OutSystems and what is our AI strategy and where we've come from and what we do well and what we're different from what is a large, pack of different options. So I think
Yeah.
that's always, as they say, a platform sale, it's highly consultative. So there's a lot of different angles of
Yeah.
attack, for lack of better terms. So I think a
Yeah.
part of us is the continued effort of driving proper enablement upfront and ongoing across business and IT at our partners, because they're a natural extension and a force multiplier for us to grow
Yeah.
where we need to grow.
And how are you driving faster engagements, like prototyping and design thinking and even business IT alignment?
Yeah, so I've touched on it a little bit beforehand, but I think the continued investment within solutions, bringing in product, bringing in our proven and fantastic crew of solution architects that are in the trenches and out in the field every day. So bringing those product and solution architecture together and looking at the patterns and trends that we see over the years and saying, not just what we did in the past is what we're going to continue to focus in on. There's new
Mm.
areas that we need to start to consider. And it goes back to the whole alliances, right? There's some of the core technologies that we integrate to support certain types of use cases is important for us to distill that, align to that, and then also amplify that, right? To make sure that our partners are aware that, hey, we have pre-built connectors, as you know, 7,500 plus, and we connect really into any of the core systems or any of these ancillary systems that many organizations already have in place. And so for us, I think it's that bringing product, bringing solution architecture, and then the patterns that we see to then activate what I would say is that, again, that more prescriptive go-to-market partner solution approach, which is well underway right now. And I think hopefully the market will continue to see that come out as later in this year and into next. But that's really the key. Is we got to focus is hard, but it's really, I think, what Woodson and Andy from a senior leadership level are bringing into our go-to-market is how do we scale? And to scale, we got to be more focused. And this is one of the areas that that's going to be driving our growth.
Okay, great. And there's hundreds of partners globally. Obviously, Americas has a number of partners. Some more kind of better performing than others. So what would you say is one missed opportunity that you think partners are still overlooking?
Yeah. So I think, as you mentioned, we have a wide set of partners that are supporting many different industries. And so I think, and we get this challenge, and so I would promote that partners continue to challenge us on this, is getting down to what I would say is a prescriptive go-to-market motion with OutSystems. That's onus is on us as well. So it's not just to say, hey, you have to solve it, you're the partner.
Yeah.
But the transparency I'll bring, as I mentioned earlier, forward is we've historically have been a horizontal platform, and we have to lean on our partners to bring layer in the industry expertise and success and track record with many of their clients and our clients alike. So for us is, how do we get there? And this is the body of work that continues globally that I'm driving here in the Americas as well, is getting to a prescriptive playbook with OutSystems and leading more with, again, the value-based conversation for that given industry or sub-industry or client and the use case they're trying to deliver it, and answer the question quickly as to why they can support that effort and do it in less time and more cost effectively and more flexibility and scalability over time. So that's crucial. And then backing that in with the platform differentiation. Many customers at this point, as you know this, they, at least from the business side of the house, they don't care what tool you use. They want to know what reassurances they'll get of actually you delivering on the promises that you're making, right? And so partners, if we get to that prescriptive playbook where they have confidence and reassurance and proven success stories and practices to support, then naturally leading with that conversation creates what I would say the buy-in, right, and the hook.
Yeah.
And then underneath that, it's really sort of, okay, well, now you've got me. So how are you going to do this, right? And then I think then we point to the platform capabilities, differentiation, and obviously market leading statistics across customers and analysts and developers alike. So I think that's the key recipe. I think from my perspective, as I've gone
Mm.
through my 25 plus years, is it still remains, you got to lead with the business pain and the outcomes, and then support that, right, with proven experience and success stories to then talk about the technology. Because if you lead
Yeah.
with the technology, then you get quickly dropped into a technical validation, which is oftentimes you still have to do it,
Yeah.
but then, you're already subjected to, who you're speaking for, which is you're getting into the speeds and fees or requirements.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm interested to know, obviously, it may not be in this current role of yours, but being in that systems for a while, and from my experience of speaking to more of the kind of high level management people for your end customers, usually because they're looking to, obviously, like you said, there's pain points, you want to go in and show them how OutSystems can, reduce that. They'll tend to be more open, and it tends to be the existing development team, which can be the harder sell,
For sure.
because in my opinion, it's a bit like, your sports team, you won't change, right? So a developer who's been working with .NET versus a leader who's worked with multiple will be much more open, versus a development team will be much more skeptical, because they don't want to, they see it as more changing their skill set rather than, like you touched on, another tool that you're adding, to your tool belt. Is that something you've seen along your time of
Yeah.
working with OutSystems?
I think that's the biggest, that's the biggest hurdle we face often is another platform. Why would I bring another platform in? And then, oh, add on top of that, you're asking me to, and it's not the case, but to throw away all of the
Yeah.
the work I've done in training and in different coding languages to, I have my team. And so that is a big, it's always and remains an obstacle for us. Right. And but I think that's going back is, you know, leading with what other folks are doing and how they've come along that journey, and helping share with those folks within IT that are going to be either in enterprise architecture
Mm.
or rapid application development, or all of the above, that are ultimately the ones that are going to have to go through the change, right? Absorb that and compel them as to why it's in, what's in it for them. And so we have to run the business and the technical track. They're both important. Now, if you lead more on the business side, top down, naturally you're going to get better, I would say, acceptance or maybe consideration
Yeah.
of moving this direction, right? So it is a combination of effort, but that's historically because we've led with the platform in many cases, we get regulated to those folks, right? And I like to actually take that challenge head on and talk about one or two customers and talk about their development team and what
Yeah.
they went through and how they set it up, and now what the results they've delivered. So if you can paint the picture that it's actually not going to be a detriment or a risk point for them, but actually more
Yeah.
of, hey, you're going to be more productive and deliver more outcomes and success back into your organization and business, then you see a little bit of the mindset shift. But there's always that initial resistance, right, to change. And
Yeah.
I think we still see that. But partners need to help us in that too as well. It's absolutely crucial. And then we also, systems needs to help ourselves
Yeah.
and catering to those messages more effectively.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on, I think use cases is one of the most important pieces, right? Because obviously,
Yeah,
especially out systems, you have such big branded companies who as use cases, which can obviously help in those discussions. The global, well-known businesses that are adopting out systems and
sure. Yeah,
going all in on the platform can only, help. Like most people I speak to, they focus on use cases and having an internal champion within the customer, being really key to kind of that, that relationship flourishing. And, I'm keen to know about, your, since you've been in the role, kind of, what some of the things you've learned the hard way, some challenges, but also what do you feel has gone really well?
yeah. Use cases. Just hitting on that topic and coming back to and
Yeah.
around to answer that question. I think use cases is like many terms thrown out there, and that can mean a lot of different things. And so I think we ourselves need to align on when we refer to use cases. What do you mean? And I think there's a couple of variations. There's more
Mm.
like accelerators that can be pre-built components that help
Yeah.
fast track certain types of
Mm.
applications or solutions. And those could be a cluster of solutions or be very specific, right? It could be, hey, it's claims management, right? There's a lot under that. Or it could be even field services. There's a lot under that. Or it could be very specific to, um, claims denial management, right? That's going into a couple of different modules. So there's variations of use
Yeah.
cases. So I think that's obviously the red herring a bit there of you got to be, one, have a terminology, but more importantly, align with the customer when they
Yeah.
throw those terms out. What do they mean by that? Because a use case can be large and multifaceted, or it can be very small and very, very
Yeah.
pointed, right? So I think that's for us has been some of the lessons learned of not kind of putting all of those use cases into one bucket. And then I think going back to OutSystems and the approach we need to take with that is I think we have to be able to recognize that when people say solutions, there's several questions underneath that or use cases that are top of mind, which is we tend to kind of approach it as, okay, well, what's the outcome? Okay, great. Then what is your current you know, technology that's supporting that effort. And so it could be a homegrown, system that's highly customized that may require a lot more unraveling, so to speak, for lack of a technical term, to then determine how you would actually rebuild or refactor in some degrees.
Yeah.
Or it could be, hey, it's working pretty well, and we want to preserve the primary sort of core system, but just add into that. And so that's the blessing and the curse of OutSystems, right? The flexibility of that. And so that does require a bit of a consultative approach. So a lot more leading questions and discovery of what they're trying to solve. And then what's the landscape or constraints or maybe lack thereof that they're working within to determine how we fold into that conversation. I guess, hopefully I answered part of that question. I think the
Yeah.
other was just more of these enterprises largely have to start somewhere. And so, without getting into too much specifics, you got to land at something that's reasonable, both from a kind of impact and I think licensing and implementation
Yeah.
perspective, right? So I think we can start small, but the question is, okay, when you start really small, doesn't mean we can't expand into more applications, but you want to have enough sort of buy-in, right? And I guess commitment to see it through. And so that's why we tend to look at, hey, enterprise more, and then there's a subset within enterprise that kind of starts. And so what I've seen as a common recipe for success for, for a lot of these large enterprise organizations is that many, whether 30, 40, $50 billion company, as an example, they've got enterprise architecture and they maybe have IT organizations that are lined up to product lines or line of business areas, is start with getting buy-in with obviously, who's making the decisions around bringing in technology, but more importantly, find a BU or line of business where you can prove that out. And that's kind of been the rinse and repeat where large enterprises typically don't go massive, large scale out of the gate, right? Unless it's a very pointed, specific use case. At times they do. But if you start and prove that success when you got IT and a line of business seeing the value of that, then that can be propagated much, much faster. And so you do really get that acceleration of pushing that out into the broader enterprise. And that's where I see traction quickly accelerates, right? And you get the flywheel. And so you got to start somewhere, but it's got to be meaningful enough. And I think that recipe in tandem with partners is where we're focused and where we're trying to continue to be more consistent with.
Great. That's great. And yeah, going back to kind of, in your role, kind of what you've been doing and kind of, it's not even 12 months. So there's always a, even though you've got that experience, there's still a learning curve, right? When you come
Absolutely.
into a position, getting to know the partner ecosystem, everybody, you have to kind of head down and just kind of get as much knowledge and information as possible. So, what have you felt, was difficult, and what were the things that you think have done really well and you're still kind of backing that going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, as you were asking the question, I was thinking, what is it? I think it does come down ultimately to trust as a big, big aspect with any partnership relationship, as we know, not to go too far off track, but trust for me is one of our core values and part of and keeping the customer and, front and center as part of the innovation you're trying to drive. So for me, stepping into the role, which I knew would be challenging, it was a bit of a, what I would say rebuild. I had a lot of trust with the field organization and really cross functionally. And so you can't, right? You can't recreate, you can't create that too quickly, right? That's really
Yeah.
hard. So I think that from lessons learned was, I felt even before I stepped into it, now looking back, was a critical component of some of the work in progress that we're doing, is to have that well embedded, because I got engagement, collaboration, not just from leadership, but cross functionally out of the gate. And when folks, saw me step into role, there was a level of trust from their side, but like, hey, Luis is going to step in and do what
Yeah.
he can, even though he doesn't have a long track record of
Yeah.
managing partners. I've been working with partners for many, many years in different
Yeah.
capacities, right? So driving those customer engagements. So that was a big thing, is having that foundation of trust. And so, there's other aspects that I think helped out, but I think that was the plus side of the house. And I think that continues to remain in place, and I have to nurture that, continue that doesn't stop. And I think maybe the tough side of the house, it's like with anything. I think you go into a position, into a role, and you have certain expectations naturally, right?
Yeah.
You try not to limit yourself. You have to open up your aperture. And I did. I think the complexity of rationalizing a partner ecosystem, building up a team, hitting very aggressive
Yeah.
targets definitely was more than I would have thought it would be, even though I knew it would be a challenge. So I
Yeah.
think the good news is that the effort and time, I think, is now it's stabilizing for me from a
Yeah.
personal standpoint, and work-life balance, as we all try to achieve that in this day and era, which is, I don't know, it's
Very difficult.
it's very difficult. You have kids, I have kids, so I
Yeah.
think that's another topic for a different type of podcast.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, for me, stabilizing to where I feel now I can drive more strategic
Mhm.
work investments in the areas that will move the needle further, right, and more quickly
Yeah.
is key. But the sharp edges and what you get into, and the different types of partners and ecosystems, and making sure you're triangulating between
Mm.
OutSystems teams and the customer, the program. So there's a lot of facets that I'm sure many other partner leaders can understand. That's a big part of the job, is how to get kind of clarity on all those pieces, but then be able to translate that into execution. And
Mm.
so having to be, what I would say, and I always will be, I think, is a player coach,
Yeah.
because I like to remain in the field, being with my
Yeah.
team and with the partners, having a pulse on what's going on. This thing, the minute you kind of move away from that, you lose
Yeah.
sight of what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a challenge. And now I have to start to kind of disengage, not in a
Mhm.
negative way, but in the right way, to
Yeah.
operate this partner business at scale. And that's sort of what I would say is the next chapter of my learning and stepping into the role and supporting what we need to do here at OutSystems. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yep.
A lot of facets there, more I'm sure I could talk about, but those are some of the two things that spring to mind.
And finally, looking ahead, what do you kind of, and obviously I know the platform is evolving. There's things that cannot
Yeah.
be spoken about. But what's exciting you the most about the next 12 months, for OutSystems partnerships?
Yeah. So I think I'd be remiss not to mention what's in Martin stepping in, I think has all of us very excited. And, not just from a leadership standpoint, but also activating continued alignment that, Andy had already started, Andy Pemberton, our CRO, align our organizations really to be rowing in the same direction. I think, every organization goes through alignment. Alignment is, again, one of the key pieces, but I think that's what I'm most excited about. It is the injection of a proven industry leader that's scaled,
Yeah.
the biggest tech companies in the
Yeah.
world, Salesforce, and activated a very healthy and rich partner ecosystem, coupled with the work that we'd already started, with Andy and team. I think that convergence only now propels us into the future, into 2026 and beyond, with a great opportunity to seize in the market, right? And I think that, to me, has got that alignment, the vision, the focus on growth, and building off a foundation of fantastic success will make sure that we work smarter and not just harder. And I think that's, to me, is a key piece. I mean, I've been at organizations where I've scaled from, millions to hundreds of millions. And so it requires different muscles, and you have to
Yeah.
train differently when you're going from
Yeah.
half a
Yeah.
billion to a billion plus 2 billion, right? To wherever this thing ends up. But I think that's what excites me. I think the market potential is there. I view whenever I evaluate a company, I have a couple of criteria. One is, what's the market opportunity, the TAM, so to speak, and then what is the product market fit relative to that? is it viable? Is it
Yeah.
going to be resilient? And then, what is my ability to move the needle? And
Yeah.
in that vein, and then also what's the culture, and not necessarily in those order, but those are essentially the four areas. So when I take a step back from the day-to-day grind, I visit those four aspects to say, okay, do I still believe in those four? And I do. And so I think that's what keeps me going, and that's what motivates me for the future.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I appreciate you speaking to me, Lewis. It was great to speak to you, and um, really kind of great to see kind of your ideas, what you're trying to kind of achieve, and it'll be interesting to see how things evolve, and maybe we speak again in the future, because I'm sure there's a whole other conversation that could be had with Gen AI and everything, evolving in the partnership space, and especially like you said, even with Woodson coming in as well.
Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure for us as always. Looking forward to see you in person here soon.
Yes.
A lot of exciting events coming up here in September and October. So thank you for the time and the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Lewis.